Welcome back to Rooted and Restless. I'm Marianne Smith Edge. While some of us are born into a farm family, others make the choice to marry into one. And such is the case of my guest today, Jennifer Schmidt, registered dietitian and full-time farmer in Eastern Maryland. Jennifer, I met probably over 15 years ago and have been so impressed how she has transferred her management, leadership skills, and scientific knowledge into the world of farming. And I mean definitely into the world. Jennifer currently serves on the board of the U.S. Grain and Bioproducts Council, which allows her to connect with farmers, and especially female farmers, across the world. And it's only fitting to have Jennifer on the show today to discuss the International Year of the Woman Farmer. Jennie, it's great to see you again, and let's talk about the International Year of the Farmer. I must admit, I have the farm connection, and I really hadn't heard too much about it until you and one of my other colleagues have mentioned it. So tell me a little bit more, and love to hear really the impact of women farmers globally.
So thank you for having me today. I think the International Year of the Woman Farmer sort of been lost, I guess, in the shuffle of things. I mean, the UN declared 2026 would be the International Year of the Woman Farmer 23-24. And then actually in that year, USDA and the US State Department had a very strong program where they sent myself and a woman rancher, Jacqueline Wilson from Nebraska. We went to Vietnam and Indonesia on a Women International Year of the Woman Farmer meeting, talking about basically thought exchange between us and the women in both Vietnam and Indonesia. And I've seen some promotion of it, but I don't think USDA has really taken the ball and run with it so far this year. Hopefully that will change. But I have seen, like our local state farm bureau is promoting it, the Global Farmer Network. There's some other organizations that are promoting it. And of course, the UN is carrying that ball forward. But I think it's really important for folks to realize just how many women are involved in agriculture, because so many of the farms around the world are small subsistence farmers, where the women do the majority of the farming to generate food for their families, and whatever is surplus from their crop, they then, sell to the local community or take to the market. So very different from, the U.S. agriculture and the way things are set up for us here. But around the world, millions of women are smallholder farmers, and are, some of the majority of who are actually growing our food around the world.
So when you talk about the women farmers and the information I've known as well, what would you say where maybe the biggest impact of women farmers are? You mentioned Vietnam. Is it in Asia or Africa? And what you talked about, what they're growing definitely impacts, but more small crops, specialty crops, we would call them. But what do you see that's being grown?
Yeah, so I see a lot of specialty crops, or they're specialty crops for us, and they may be staple crops in their country, right? So we would use different terminology to describe them than they would. I mean, one of the farms that we visited in Vietnam, she raised broiler chickens, she raised eggs, she raised a small herd of pigs for pork. And then she had, some very unique, and I can't even tell you what they are in English or Vietnamese, vegetables and fruits. So, those were things that, both were for her family, as well as for community, for sales, for what she didn't use herself. In Indonesia, one of the places we went to was actually women's farmer co-op who were growing different herbs to make different medicinal supplements, if you will, teas and powders for like chai type of beverages, fermented type beverages. So that was really kind of a niche for them. So it wasn't them growing their food, but it was them growing specialty herbs in order to make saleable product, right? So they were trying to capture a market, a local market of folks who were wanting to make teas and beverages from these different herbs that are used around the world as different, not necessarily treatments. They're not pharmaceuticals, but supplements for them, and for them it was an income stream. And so I thought that was a very sort of unique business model for them to be able to generate income from their families from small plots, right? So we're talking, half an acre or less of that, but it was an income stream for them. And I think that's where people kind of lose sight of agriculture is it's an income stream, right? Whether it's my farm or these ladies' farmers co-op in Indonesia, that they're looking to make a living off of the land and growing your food or growing your supplements that way, or your tea.
And you're right. I mean, it is an economic, it's just like anything else. It's definitely an economic driver and what keeps food on a farmer's table. I can definitely appreciate that, having grown up on a small dairy farm. Just as you have evolved more into the U.S. Agriculture, have you, I know from my perspective, it seems like an increase in women in agriculture, but from your viewpoint, have you seen more, even in the, I'd say, more commodity crops, more women engaged over the time that you've been involved?
Yeah, I would say so for sure, because one, I think more women like myself are active on the farm. So I don't really, yes, I'm married to a farmer, but I don't really call myself a farm wife. I call myself a farmer because that's my full-time job. And I see more and more women stepping into that role, more daughters taking over farms as opposed to sons. Not necessarily more, but a higher percentage of daughters coming back to the farm than you used to see, and being acknowledged for that role in taking over the operation, and not just maybe from the business side of things, but from the actual production side of things. So I think that one, USDA has sort of reclassified how they're capturing the information, because it used to be you could have one main operator. And so therefore it was usually the guy, the husband or the father. And so now they're capturing more than one main operator, which even makes sense for our family, because our family was never one operator. It was two brothers. So, who's going to take credit for it? And so just, the fact that, when you have a family entity of multi people, it's not a sole proprietorship anymore like it used to be. It's various levels of partnership within families. And I think that's probably presenting itself more in the data now that USDA is showing, 30% or so of farmers in the US are female. And I think they were always there, or somewhat a portion of them always there, but not accounted for because of the way they defined a farmer.
Well, I can say I witnessed that just a little bit. My mother was a perfect example of that. Obviously, she would have been classified a farmer's wife, but, running a small dairy, and actually as my older brother and I became, went to college, wasn't around, she was the one that was not only taking care of all the household, but running, doing all the calves in the morning, and then she was running hay balers, and she was really a partner in that regard. Right. But of course, wasn't counted as one as such in that.
Yeah.
Well, let's switch a little bit, because we've alluded to the economics of agriculture, and you and I have both experienced it. You are experiencing it on a much larger scale today. And I think the general public starts seeing headlines about some of the economics, and it's not, some of these are not new. We've always if you're farming, you're going to have economic, and you're going to have conditions that are uncontrollable, i.e., weather, in that regard. So I'd be interested. You can take it any direction you want. Some of the challenges currently in from the economic standpoint when it comes to input costs and what it really costs to, produce the food that you're producing.
Yeah. So, and I didn't really describe my farm to begin with, just so folks know that we we are row crops. We grow corn and soybeans and wheat. And we also grow green beans for a vegetable company on the eastern shore of Virginia. We're on the eastern shore of Maryland. And we also have about 22 acres of wine grapes for the wine industry in our mid-Atlantic region. And honestly, it's one of those industries, farming is one of those industries that buys retail and sells wholesale for the most part, because, commodities are traded at the Chicago Board of Trade. So we have really no say in what price we get for corn, wheat, or soybeans, or anything that's traded on the Board of Trade. But this year, or this past year, I say 2025, it's been difficult in general. Not only for row crops, but also in our region anyways, because I can't speak to all vegetable growers. Obviously, California and Florida are very different levels of vegetable growing than here in Maryland. But we got a really low price for green beans, and they're fresh market green beans. So they're not for canning, they're not for freezing unless they don't grade out. So we try to grow premium grade green beans that are packaged in, cellophane bags and sold at, Walmart, Giant Foods, whatever grocery store. Likewise, with the wine grapes, wine consumption is down. So I've had cancellations from wineries as far as purchases of tons of grapes. I had about 5 tons that I left for the birds last fall because I didn't have a market for it. And so I would say across the board, at least for us in our region, it's not only that commodity prices are low, but, when we sold our green beans, you're at the mercy of the price at the time of the market, which was low for us this year. And, wine consumption, alcohol consumption is down across the board. And that's not just us. I mean, I know California vineyards are getting ripped out because the market's just kind of in a slump. And we've seen that before. That's not new. I mean, that's the thing with these economic drivers is the market's they're not on a roller coaster ride, but they have their ups and their downs. And right now, prices are higher as far as the cost of fertilizer, the cost of seed, the cost of any inputs that you have, price of fuel. To run any of your equipment, and the commodity prices are low. So break even is very, very, very tight. I would say a lot of row crop farmers this year did not break even, or this past year. Last 2 years have been pretty difficult. And that's, it's cyclical, but it's challenging because if you're a farmer who has not been able to sort of have a solid footing in your finances in the good years to plan for the bad years. And I think that's, for us been part of what we've always tried to do economically. We all took pay cuts this past year. We did not earn as much income as we had hoped to, but we also want to make sure the family farm survives, right? So that's sort of the trade-off as a family business. And I'm sure that's true if you're a dry cleaning family or whatever other type of business that is owned by a family, you have to make those decisions to, keep your family business running in the lean years by, being more conservative with even what you pay yourself and what you pay for. as opposed to, in the good years when you have a bit more cushion to take care of things.
Well, I think you bring up the economic realities. My father, a small farm, but was so intent on not, probably to his detriment, not going big, of having the credit. My husband worked for Farm Credit for years, so what happened kind of in the 80s and the 90s in that regard. So, all those conditions that we've all experienced, obviously, back to is hoping that you learn from it, but sometimes the reality is, unrest in Ukraine and different things that have helped impact fertilizer costs and
Right.
as well as other things. Those kind of are out of your
Exactly.
purview. You have you can't control the commodity markets as well.
And it is a global market, for inputs and for exports. Some of our fertilizer, our phosphorus, all those things come from other countries. They're things that we need to grow a healthy crop. But we're reliant on those inputs coming from, other parts of the world that we have no control over and no control over pricing.
Now, let's hear from Mindy Herman, registered dietitian, food and nutrition writer, and a guru on all the latest food trends.
Hi, Marianne and Jennie. Here's a quick Trends Minute on agriculture and farming. A recent Ag America blog predicted the tariffs pushed up consumer prices by nearly 2% for about a $2,400 loss in consumer buying power. Estimates say the tariffs also have raised costs of some fertilizers by $100 a ton. Jennie, I don't know a lot about fertilizer use on farms, but that number sounds significant. And the American Farm Bureau Federation says that more than half of U.S. farms are losing money. Now let's also take a quick peek at domestic versus imported produce. According to USDA, about 65% of our fresh fruit and 35% of fresh vegetables were imported as of 2023. The top 10 imported products with increasing share include favorites like avocados, bell peppers, blueberries and raspberries, broccoli and cauliflower, cucumbers, snap beans, and tomatoes. Hopefully those have room to expand domestically.
Now, let's return to our conversation. And I think you mentioned the green beans because, I think we're seeing now people like, well, if soybeans and corn are so low, why don't you just switch crops? And I've had that pointed to me at times. Well, why aren't you just growing broccoli? Because, we need more fruits and vegetables. But I think you bring up a really good point about, yes, you grew green beans, but it's not, at the end of the day, it wasn't necessarily a cash crop, so to speak. So right. How do you address that when, at least you can say, I grow a variety of crops. You're not just, quote, monocropping. But how do you address that to individuals when there's always this, well, we're having to import so many fruits and vegetables. Why aren't we growing more of our own, right. Basically?
Yeah, I've gotten that argument many times. Why don't you just grow lettuce? All these things. First of all, one, you have to have the infrastructure locally. And by that, I mean, so not all of us can be direct to consumer. We're not all going to take tomatoes or lettuce or whatever to the farmer's market because the scale of what we are growing, if we grow 250 acres of green beans, we're shipping tractor trailer loads of green beans. There's no way I can take that to the farmer's market and expect anything to stay fresh and nutritious because it's a tractor trailer load. The same thing, we grew tomatoes for a canning company in Pennsylvania for over 20 years. And just the fact that, when we were harvesting tomatoes, we were harvesting 12 to 15 tractor trailer loads a day. And you have to take them to a facility that can handle them. And so, you either have to have the company who has the infrastructure to do the cleaning and the cooling and the packaging, even if they're fresh, or if they are a cannery, like for tomatoes, because they were Roma tomatoes, they weren't fresh market tomatoes, to be able to unload those tractor trailer trucks, clean them and can them in a short period of time. And that may be more prevalent in the, like I said, the California, Florida area that have more acres of produce than we have. But all the other constraint is you have to have irrigation. We cannot get a contract to grow vegetables if you do not have irrigation. You have to be able to guarantee water. So if you only have dry land and you don't have irrigated acres, you're not going to get a vegetable contract with any of the vegetable companies if you happen to have any near you. Because again, you've got to be able to guarantee a crop. They aren't covered under crop insurance, the federal crop insurance program, like commodities are. And they're a higher risk crop, right? They're way more susceptible to diseases. They're way more susceptible to drought. And so you've got a lot more contingencies that you have to deal with. And you have to be able to afford the equipment that goes with that crop, because guess what? Not every crop has the same type of machinery. So the only reason we grow any vegetables at all is because the companies that we deal with send us the specialty harvesters and the trucks to haul that crop away with. We would never be able to, for 200 acres of vegetables, it would never economically cash flow for us to buy a $500,000 harvester that only harvests one crop, tomatoes or green beans. They're not the same harvester, they're different. Peas are different from green beans. Lima beans are different from green beans. I mean, we've grown all of these crops in the past, but only because the companies that we grow for are the ones who bring in the harvesters and do the harvesting for us. We don't have to capitalize that very high cost equipment. And that's the only reason vegetables work for us in our area, because of that factor. And otherwise we wouldn't be growing vegetables. The other issue now is labor. And you see this with immigration going on right now. It's going to get even worse this year. Is if you have a hand harvested crop like we do for grapes, and getting enough people in to harvest by hand that type of crop is very, very challenging not this time of year, because this is not the time of year, it's winter time, but it's very difficult. Labor has been a major factor in agricultural production for specialty crops over the last several years. And we need those workers, and we don't have a good system of getting legal workers here in the United States. I would not consider the H-2A program a good program. I've heard horrific stories about people who have tried to participate in it. I know lots of people do, but it's not a federal program that is seamless and easy to deal with.
Well, Jennie, I think you've given us such a good insight, and the reality is that if people, we all can complain about the cost of food, but when you talk about the reality of how much it really costs to put food on the table, I know I'm always amazed when, we own tractors, no big combines, because we work with farmers that do their own, but I don't think the general public realizes that, we all can own one car, one vehicle, and it can take us a lot of different places. Not the same when it grows crops, as you mentioned. It's not the same truck or sedan doesn't work for every crop, and that's where the expense, kind of the hidden expense to the right. Someone that's just buying it at the grocery store. So, quick questions here is that. You've talked about growing, and I know we've talked before that you have grown organic as well as conventional. What practices are you growing now? And of course, a lot of times, regardless of how we would define it, you're still you still have very sustainable practices. But
Right.
curious of what type of process or how you would describe the type of farming.
Right. I mean, I want to say we're a conservation farming practice because there's no kind of cookie cutter definition. Conventional to me actually means plowing, and we don't plow. Um, we do some conservation farming. We do a lot of no-till agriculture, which means we don't work up our ground before we plant the next crop. Um, we do a lot of conservation practices like cover crop. More than a decade ago, we did transition about 100 of our acres into certified organic in order to really to just try and capture a different market, a higher value market for organic grain. So it's still organic corn and soybeans, still row crops, but for Horizon Dairy at the time had a couple of big operations in our area. So there was a demand for organic grains. And so, since we've done a lot of no-till over the years, since the 1960s, my father-in-law first started implementing some no-till. We tried to do organic in a no-till fashion, which meant we planted a cover crop and then tried to crimp it down so that it would form a mat of residue to suppress the weeds. I mean, that's the biggest issue with any type of production system is controlling your weeds. Because if you don't control your weeds, you affect your yield and you affect your moisture because the weeds will outcompete your cash crop, whatever it is, for moisture and for nutrients. And so we tried to do it no-till a couple of years. It was very disastrous. You know, we normally average about 185 bushels per acre in corn, and we averaged maybe 80. And that does, even though you're getting a higher price for it, it does not offset the loss of the yield. So then we went to conventional organic, which is the main way to control for weeds is to do tillage and repetitiously do tillage because you have to make multiple passes across the field with a cultivator or some type of tiller, a plow or whatever to control for the weeds. And for us, that's sort of counterintuitive to our conservation sustainability mentality of the more you disturb your topsoil, the more erosion you're going to have. And so we try to do as little tillage cultivation as possible. And so if we were going across the field 5, 6, 7 times to control for weeds, that just, it creates more compaction because you're driving that heavy equipment across the field more times than you should. And it just was still not yielding as high as what we were able to do with our traditional fields. So we did it for 7 years. I mean, it's not like we tried a year or two and threw the towel in, but you can only lose money so many years in a row before you have to call it quits on at least a certain practice. Same with like vegetables. You know, if we weren't generating an income from vegetables, you could only do that for so many years before you have to say, okay, this is not working. We didn't plant wheat this year because it doesn't pencil out, right? I mean, a lot of things are not penciling out right now. We still need to grow something. So we're still going to plant all our acres, but we're going to choose the ones that have the least risk of financial loss. And so with us, with the organic practices, we just decided that that was kind of counterintuitive for us to want to do more conservation practices and the amount of tillage that it was requiring us to control the weeds in the organic farming system. So it really had nothing to do with pesticide use. It had to do with tillage. And that's kind of the trade-off, I think, that people don't understand. There is a trade-off between tillage and chemicals, right? So you're either going to use an herbicide to control a weed, or you're going to use tillage to control the weeds. Both of them have impacts, right? So it's not that one is better than the other. So you need to make that choice. And for us, we farm in a very sandy soil. We're on the coastal plain of the Eastern Shore. So we don't have high organic matter. And for us, doing tillage is more detrimental to our soils than using an herbicide to control for weeds. And that's the trade-off that I don't think most consumers really understand a farmer has to make in terms of which farming system they're choosing to implement.
And Jennie, you bring up all the right things, because at the end of the day, to maintain farming, you have to maintain a sustainable a farming economic condition, and so those are the trade-offs with anything. So as we wrap up, is there any other like top of line myth that around agriculture, or that you'd like to quickly dispel?
Well, I don't know if I could do it quickly. I would say to me, the biggest myth is still about spraying. I don't know that most consumers really understand what it is, what we're using when we're applying any type of pesticide, whether it's an herbicide, an insecticide, a fungicide, is that we're out there dousing our fields. That's probably the one that drives me the most crazy, because I'm the one who runs the sprayer, right? I am a registered dietitian. I am also a certified spray applicator. And so I have a lot of chemistry, as you know. To get your degrees in nutrition, you do a lot of biology and a lot of chemistry. Farming is also a lot of biology and chemistry. And so for me, understanding the science behind both nutrition and pesticides are not counterintuitive to each other, but that I'm very confident in the practices that I'm implementing, how I am managing it in my fields, and what I bring home to my family, because we do eat the fruits and vegetables that we grow. We also live right next to our farm field. So anything that I'm applying, I want to make sure that my family and I, myself, are safe. And I think that most consumers who think that we're out there, dousing our fields, don't really have a concept about what it is and what it is we're doing, and how little we're actually using.
Well, you said it so eloquently, and the reality is, I always say too, it goes back to those costs. No one wants to buy more inputs, for the product. So again, I've never met a farmer, maybe occasional, but a farmer that wasn't concerned about the safety and overall the quality of the product for the sustainable future.
Right.
Thank you so much. I can't think of a better person. You should be the ultimate spokesperson for the International Year of the Woman Farmer, because you truly are. And I think you're off to an international trip shortly, and so and you represent us well, and wonderful, as truly a combination of a full-time farmer and registered dietitian, and who better than having you today, Jennie? So thank you so much for the time, and because there's never a downtime. I don't care what time of the year is on the family farm. So thanks again.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
As we wrap up this episode, I am mindful of how women in agriculture have definitely evolved over the last several decades. Jennie is not only married to a farmer, but she is a full-time farmer. But so was my mother, even though she might have been classified only than a farm wife. Being on a dairy farm did not allow her the luxury of just, quote, staying in the house, especially when the two children were grown and left for college and careers. My mother, in her 60s, were going beyond just taking care of calves. It became baling hay and so much more, and she was always the bookkeeper. So perhaps it was not surprising when I got this very definite phone call on a very cold January night several years ago that didn't tell me that anything that had happened to my father, other than the first words out of her mouth were, "We're going out of the dairy business." And yes, my dad had broken his ankle, and she saw that it was time at 71 years of age to close the business. And so it was. In about 3 or 4 days, all the cows were sold, and they were officially retired. You might not find this as humorous since you didn't know my mother, but if you ask my husband, he would probably say that if you know me, you knew Jeanette. Food always has a story, and it's not as simple as you think. Thanks for listening. Subscribe to Rooted and Restless wherever you listen to podcasts, or find us on YouTube.